So what do you do when your buddy Chad comes up to you and says, "Hey, Richard, you want to be on a TV show? We're going to race some rich guy in a McLaren, and the wagon needs more power." Well, my friend, you've come to the right place. Time to add some boost.
Something cool's going on here. So how much power does a wagon really need, Chad?
All of it?
In this video, we're going to take a look at power upgrades we made to a Blueprint engine Power Adder small block 400. But more importantly is the backstory. This particular engine was in a wagon, and this wagon belonged to Chad Reynolds' wife, his late wife, Daphne. Unfortunately, Daphne passed away of cancer. Now, everybody that knew Daphne loved her. In fact, Daphne, Chad, his whole family.
When the truck and trailer can't go through the drive-thru. Everyone wave, what's up?
Del Taco for the win.
Yeah, the walk up.
Awesome people. When Chad came to me and said, "Hey, Richard, we got the wagon. You know the wagon. You know the story. The guys from Fastest Car want this wagon on the show." Now, the bestest things to ever run on nitrous is high 11s. The car we're racing against, a McLaren twin turbo, probably runs 10s. We need more power. No problem, man, I'm there. We're gonna upgrade the base motor, we're gonna add some boost, we're gonna retain the nitrous, just in case. We need 1,000 horsepower in this wagon. And here's how we did it. Building more power for Chad's motor was actually fairly easy because we were already starting out with something that was pretty good. In fact, we were starting out with a Blueprint Engines 400 Power Adder combination, small block Chevy, 400-inch, 4125 by 375. It had as-cast Blueprint aluminum heads, a decent sized cam, like a 236, 248 cam. And Chad had run this a bunch already. As a matter of fact, he ran it with a couple of stages of nitrous. The wagon had already run 11s on it, so it was fairly stout even in that combination with the mild shot of nitrous, 150, 175 shot of nitrous. It worked pretty well. And the wagon would go 11s even though it was pretty heavy, but we needed more power to combat that supercar stuff. So we had to get this thing, we had to push it, we wanted to push it deep into the 10s, so we wanted to make a ton of power. So equipped with the way that it came out of the wagon, all we did was, we didn't run the EFI because we didn't want to pull the EFI off of the vehicle, but we did run this thing with a simple carburetor. This was a 750 HP and a dual plane intake. This combination produced 457 horsepower and 473 foot-pounds of torque. But what we wanted to do was, we knew we were going to add a Procharger supercharger to it, so we were not going to use the nitrous. Well, I take that back. We were going to keep a 100 shot on it in addition to the nitrous, or in addition to the supercharger. But we knew we were going to be adding a blower. But before we did that, we wanted to improve the power output of the naturally aspirated motor. So what we did was, we did a cylinder head, cam, and intake upgrade on it. So we took off the Blueprint as-cast heads and installed a set of TFS CNC ported Super 23 heads. Then we upgraded the camshaft. Now originally we wanted to go with kind of a dedicated big blower cam, but I made a mistake and ordered the wrong one, so we had to install something that we had laying around the shop, and that turned out to be a comp cam. It was a 562 580 lift split, 248 254 degree duration split, and 110 degree lobe separation angle. It was a pretty good step up from the original cam, but it was not exactly the one that we wanted. We also installed fuel injection on this thing. We put an Edelbrock Victor Jr. intake, designed for EFI with port injection, and we used a 4-hole 1000 CFM throttle body because we were going to make sure that we were able to tune this thing with a supercharger. So port injection was kind of a natural way to go. But here's what happened. Run naturally aspirated with our upgrades: the TFS heads, the comp cam, and that Victor Jr. EFI intake manifold. So we picked up quite a bit of power, lost some down low here in the 3,500 RPM range. But equipped with the new combination, this thing made 529 horsepower and 478 foot-pounds of torque. We pushed power out, farther than the RPM range, which would come in handy once we installed the supercharger. So now our naturally aspirated motor was doing well. Let's take a look at what happened after we installed boost. After improving the power output of our naturally aspirated combination with our bolt-on upgrade, it was time to add boost. So we installed a Procharger F1A supercharger, and to get things started, we ran it with no intercooler, run on E85, so non-intercooled with E85. And here's what happened after we installed the supercharger. The supercharger was run with a 4.5-inch blower pulley, and we actually never changed that during any of these runs. So with E85 and non-intercooled, our combination produced 945 horsepower, and 829 foot-pounds of torque. And I'll go ahead and show you the boost curves of all these at the end so you can take a look and see what happened once we ran them with intercooled or non-intercooled. But what we did next after running this non-intercooled with E85, obviously we're making big power already, but we wanted to improve upon that a little bit. So what we did was install an intercooler, an air-to-water intercooler from the guys at Procharger. We ran dyno water through it, which was about 85 degrees. So let's take a look and see what happened after we added the intercooler. But we ran the intercooler first with race gas. So race gas and intercooled pushed the power up to 966 horsepower. Although we were getting a little bit of belt slippage right at the top, as you can kind of see by the power curve. So we were a little concerned with that. That's why we didn't rev it any higher. I mean, obviously the power curve was still going up, so we had plenty of power. Now what we did was combine the two. Obviously the best combination would be E85 plus the intercooler. So we did that. Run with E85 and the intercooler, and we still had a little bit of belt slippage up here, but we managed to exceed 1,000 horsepower. Now it would easily go over that, and if we revved it all the way up to 6,500 and had a tight belt and everything was working okay, we could make a lot more power than that. But as it was, we made a lot of power. I mean, this thing exceeded 1,000 horsepower. We had a small block Chevy exceeding 1,000 horsepower, which was more than we needed, obviously, for this application. So here's our combination. Now let's take a look at our boost curves and get this motor in the wagon. Before we take a look at some video on the behind the scenes stuff when we were prepping Chad's wagon, getting ready to race that McLAREN, let's take a look at the boost curve supplied by that Procharger on the 400 on the engine dyno. So this was the Blueprint 400 with a Procharger. The Procharger had a 4.5-inch blower pulley and run with no intercooler. That combination supplied 17.5 pounds, which is why this thing makes so much power. I mean, 17.5 pounds is a lot of boost, and run on a 400 small block, you know, it's going to make a lot of power. But let's take a look and see what happened when we installed the air-to-water intercooler. That unit also came from Procharger. But here's what I want you to think about, and here's what I want you to comment about, and here's a question. So when we put the intercooler on, the boost obviously dropped, but the power went up. So did the boost drop because we increased the length of the discharge tube running from the supercharger to the throttle body, including the intercooler? Obviously there's a restriction inherent in the length of the discharge tube and the intercooler itself. So did the boost drop because of that? Or did it drop because we lowered the charge temperature? Now, we lowered the charge temperature by almost 120 degrees using the air-to-water intercooler, which obviously is beneficial, reduces the chance of detonation, adds power. So did we get a boost drop from temperature, or did we get a boost drop because of the restriction? Let me know in the comments. But here's the change, and remember, we picked up quite a bit of power going to the intercooler. We were running E85, so cool charge, good fuel, you know, good blower, nice 400. It made a lot of power. So now let's get that baby in the wagon and get on the chassis dyno. After running the motor on the dyno, it was time to put it in the car and make it work. Now I told Chad, okay, you got a supercharged small block in here. When you close the hood, that supercharger, the way that it's mounted, is going to be drawing air from the heated area right by the header. We need to have a cold air intake. No problem, he said. I'll cut a hole in the hood. We'll make a snorkel for it. Check it out.
When one hole isn't good enough, or it's in the wrong place.
Here's Chad.
That's a precise fuel measuring device. That's 3.5 gallons gas in it.
That's your fuel sending unit, right?
It is. It's totally fine.
After building the cold air intake for our supercharger, we were able to run the wagon up on the chassis dyno, which is important, you know, for tuning. As it turned out, the fuel system in the car limited power production. Now, it wasn't the pump or the injectors or even the feed line from the pump to the injectors. It was actually the size of the fuel fitting and feed line from the tank to the fuel pump. And when I say limiting, I mean it limited us to about 800 at the tire, which is an impressive amount, especially in a big wagon. I can tell you from first-hand experience, after rides in this thing, some late night passes, acceleration, definitely not the problem. Traction, definitely the problem. Something this big should not move out that fast. It was awesome. If you want to know how the wagon did against the McLaren, check out season 2 on Netflix of Fastest Cars. Not only do you get to see how the wagon did, which is awesome, you get to learn more about the backstory. You get to learn about Daphne and the wagon and Chad's family, and you get to see Chad in all his Chadness, which is awesome. Now, as much as I love the parts and the power, this industry is not about parts or power. It's about people. Chad, thanks for letting me be part of it, man. I'd do it again in a second. I'm Richard Holdner. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. I'll keep testing.